I've always said the road's got a voice if you listen hard enough, not one that talks straight, but low and long like the rumble beneath a rig's wheels. It hums to you, keeps you company when there ain't a soul in sight for 100 miles. I've been driving since I was 18. That was nearly 30 years ago. Herschel King, they call me. The CB handles changed over the years, but that one stuck. That night, I rolled into the Big J truck stop just before midnight. It was one of those quiet stations that feels forgotten by time. Dust on the pump handles, a flickering open 24 hours sign, and a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and steel. I didn't mind. It was the kind of place where the jukebox hadn't played a tune in a decade, and the waitress knew how to leave a man alone. Perfect for writing down a few thoughts for the memoir I'd been keeping in a cracked leather notebook. The parking lot was empty. Just me, my Freightliner, and that wind that always seems to blow harder when you stop moving. I eased into a booth by the window, ordered a meatloaf sandwich and a side of onion rings from the tired-eyed girl behind the counter. Her name tag said Deb. I flipped open my notebook and scribbled down a line. The road's not just where I live, it's who I am. The lights cut out. No warning, no flicker, just complete black. The hum of the fridge, the buzz from the sign outside, the low music from the kitchen radio, all gone in an instant. I froze, pen in midair. The only thing left was the emergency light near the exit, casting a sickly glow over the booths. That's when I saw it. Snow. Not outside. Inside. Tiny black flakes drifting down in the beam of the emergency light, like soot from an invisible fire. But there wasn't any heat, no burning smell, only cold, real cold. I could see my breath hang in the air like fog from a busted exhaust. I pulled the CB mic from my jacket. My hand was trembling, I won't lie. I hit the line hard, scanning channels until I found hers. Big Red Mama, come back. You copy? Red, I need you. Something's wrong here. Power's out. I can't see anything but this light. There's something in the dark. Please, call the police. Just get here, fast. Dead air. I tried again, voice cracking. Julie, it's me. It's Herschel. There's something out there. It's like the dark is moving. Please, hurry. Finally, her voice broke through. Herschel, you okay? What's going on? What are you talking about? I don't know. It ain't just a blackout. There's something outside. I can't see my rig. I think it's trying to... The radio hissed, and I lost her. Static swallowed my voice whole. That's when I heard something move outside the window. Not footsteps, not an engine, just movement. A sliding, scraping hush across the asphalt. I pressed my face to the glass, but the parking lot was swallowed in a kind of dark I can't explain. It wasn't night. It was absence. The kind of black that eats headlights, and the flakes kept falling. I tried to stand. My legs wouldn't answer. Then a voice, faint, on the CB. I'm almost there, Julie said. Herschel, hold on. But I wasn't sure I still had time to hold anything, because whatever was in that darkness, it wasn't just watching. It was waiting. They say fear comes slow, like a cold draft through a cracked window. But that night, it hit me like a jackknife on black ice. No warning, no mercy. The darkness outside that diner wasn't natural. It didn't just fill the space where light was missing. It pressed in like it had weight. And in that weight, something moved. I stayed locked in my booth, clutching the CB like it was a lifeline. The emergency light above the doorway flickered, dim and sickly, casting shadows that didn't match the shape of the tables and chairs. The black snow kept falling, drifting lazily in the beam of that failing bulb, vanishing before they touched the floor. It looked like ash, but felt colder just looking at it, like it wasn't from anything burned, but something unmade. I tried the radio again, thumb pressed hard to the talk button. Red, Julie, I don't know if you can hear me, but something's wrong here. Something real wrong. No answer, just static. Then a soft click, a breath, like someone was on the other end, just listening. I ain't alone, I whispered, not even sure if I was talking to her anymore. From the kitchen came a bang, not loud, just a single metallic clatter, like a pan tipping over on its own. I turned, slow as rust, and saw nothing but that darkness crawling across the swinging door. It wasn't just the light that was gone. It felt like the night was eating the edges of the room, bleeding into everything inch by inch. Then came a whisper, not from the radio, from the booth across from me. I snapped around, heart jamming against my ribs, and stared into the shadows. The vinyl seat sat empty, but warm. I swear I saw steam rising from a half-filled coffee mug that hadn't been there before. It looked exactly like mine. Same order, same bite missing from the sandwich. I gripped my pen tight. Don't ask why. It was the only thing I had left that still felt real. Herschel, the whisper again. My name, soft and low, like it came from inside the walls, or inside me. You're almost home. I stood, or tried to. My knees buckled, weak like I'd been driving for days without sleep. I staggered toward the counter, trying to call out for Deb, the waitress, but my voice caught in my throat. The place was dead quiet, like sound itself had been stolen. The CB crackled again. Herschel, I'm close. Lights ahead. Just hold tight. Julie's voice, blessed and sharp, cut through the silence. I fumbled to reply. Julie, don't come in. Don't stop. Just call someone. Please. I don't know what this is, but it ain't just a blackout. There was a long pause. Then her voice again, confused and hesitant. But you just called me? You said you were outside. I froze. What? You said you made it back to the truck? That you were safe? You sounded calm. Her voice trembled. You said not to worry. I dropped the mic. It clattered against the tile floor, echoing too loud in the dead silence. Because I hadn't said any of that, but someone had. The booth where the coffee sat now stood empty again. Coffee cold. Sandwich gone. My own reflection in the window behind it looked wrong. Not off. Wrong. My eyes didn't blink when I did. The reflection just watched. I backed away, heart hammering like a jackrabbit trapped in a cage. I turned and bolted through the diner out into the frigid dark. The parking lot was as black as oil, the light from the highway barely touching the edge. I could see the shape of my rig, barely. But in the mirror, I swear there was another figure. Standing beside it, a shape, tall, motionless, watching. I never made it to the truck. A siren screamed in the distance. Headlights pierced the black as emergency lights flickered into view. Julie, she made it, but I was already gone. The road never forgets. That's what they say, the old ones still grinding gears on the late-night highways. I used to think it was just talk, some poetic line shared between lonely drivers to make the asphalt seem less empty. But after that night at the Big J, I know better. The road remembers, it listens, and sometimes it answers back. Julie Merchant, Big Red Mama herself, told me what happened after. Not from some dream, not from a ghost story passed around a campfire, straight from her own trembling lips as she sat across from me in that same booth where I supposedly took my last breath. Or whatever was left of me did. She pulled in fast, tires skidding on the gravel, red lights spinning across the dark like some broken carnival. She expected chaos. She expected screams. What she found was stillness. My rig parked straight and clean, diner lights off, windows like mirrors, blank and waiting. Police were already there, lights flashing, radios squawking. A few paramedics stood near the entrance but weren't moving like they were in a rush. That's when her gut dropped. You drive long enough, you know that kind of silence. Not relief, not calm, final. Inside, the diner hadn't changed. Emergency lights buzzed in the ceiling like insects. Cold coffee cups sat untouched. Julie asked for me by name. They didn't answer, just pointed to a booth near the window. I was there, or something that looked like me, covered in a white sheet. Face pale, hand still resting near that damn notebook I'd been scribbling in. The waitress, Deb, stood nearby, pale as paper, hands wringing the same towel over and over. He just sat there, she whispered, ordered food, took a bite, and then nothing. He fell asleep, didn't wake up. Julie couldn't make sense of it. Just 20 minutes earlier, she'd been talking to me, hearing the panic in my voice, begging her to get help. She showed the cops her CB, showed the logs, the timestamps. He was alive, she kept saying. He was talking to me. But the coroner was already zipping the bag. Time of death? Estimated before the first call even reached her. She should have walked away then, let the mystery stay buried with me. But truckers don't leave their own behind. She waited, sat in that booth long after the cops cleared out and the waitress locked up. She stared at my coffee cup, my half-written page, my keys still sitting on the table like I'd just stepped out for a smoke. And then the CB in her rig crackled to life. Her heart jumped. She ran to the cab thinking maybe, just maybe, this was all some cruel mistake. But when she climbed inside, the voice that came through wasn't mine. Not really. It sounded like me. Same words, same rhythm, even the way I used to laugh at my own bad jokes. Something was off. Too calm. Too even. Like someone reading a script, not talking from the heart. "Just checking in, Red," the voice said. "Made it through the dark. Road's clear now." Julie froze. "Herschel?" No answer, just static. Then the voice again, this time softer, distant, like it was calling from far, far down some empty stretch of highway. "See you at the next stop." That was it. No more calls, no more signs. But the CB never worked right after that. No matter how many times she changed it out, tuned it, swapped rigs entirely, it always picked up faint signals late at night. Not words, just whispers. Sometimes a laugh, sometimes my name. She told me this story in a whisper, months later, parked under a highway overpass where we used to swap tales between runs. She hadn't driven since that night, said the road felt different now, like it was watching. But I do drive, still. Every now and then, I hear someone call for help over the CB. Faint, far off. Same voice as mine, same panic, same last words. And I wonder if that night at Big J wasn't my end. Maybe it was just where I left the rest of myself behind. Because something's still out there on that highway, still whispering, still moving. And the wheels? They never stopped turning. I didn't expect to come back. Not to the Big J, not to the place where I died. But something kept tugging me. Every mile, every fuel stop, every empty stretch of road under a bruised sky. A pull like a memory that ain't yours, but feels too real to ignore. Julie stopped answering the CB. Don't blame her. She'd heard enough voices that shouldn't have spoken, including mine, or whatever borrowed it. The truck stop was shuttered when I arrived. No lights, no pumps running, no music in the diner. Just weeds curling through cracked concrete and the sign overhead half lit like a grin with teeth missing. I parked my rig in the same spot. I knew it without looking. Tires fit the faded imprint like I'd never left. The air was too still, too clean, no bugs, no rustle of night wind, just quiet. I stepped inside. The diner door creaked open like it remembered me. The booths were untouched. Same cracked vinyl, same scent of fryer oil and old coffee soaked into the walls. But the table in the back, the one where I'd died, had something new. My notebook, pages open, the ink still fresh. I picked it up. Didn't feel right. Too warm, like it had been held just moments ago. My name was scribbled across the margins again and again in handwriting that was mine, but shaking. Letters sloping wrong, curling in on themselves. Below it, a final line. He's still out there. The lights buzzed once, then flared on, just for a second. Long enough for me to see the reflection in the window wasn't mine. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared as the figure in the glass stood tall and still, hands at its sides, no face, just black snow drifting from its shoulders like a burning memory collapsing in reverse. Then the lights died again, plunging everything into silence. That's when the CB in my rig came alive. Not a crackle, not static, just a whisper. Not from me, not to me. It was someone else, calling for me. Herschel, you there? I don't know what's going on. Lights just cut out. Something's outside. I think it's moving toward the truck. Young voice. Man, maybe 25, scared enough to choke on every word. I stepped outside. CB still whispering from the cab and looked up. The sky had no stars, just clouds, rolling, dark, low like smoke. No wind, no cold, just that stillness. My headlights flickered on without me touching the switch. They shone down the road, catching something standing just beyond the beam. Not moving, not walking away, waiting. The voice came again, louder now. Herschel, please, someone answer. It's right at my door. The darkness. It ain't just dark. It's watching. I didn't reply. Couldn't, because I wasn't holding the mic. I was outside the truck, so who was answering? The engine roared to life. The rig pulled away, mine, rolling off into the night like a ghost remembering how to breathe. I didn't chase it, didn't try to stop it, because I knew I was no longer the driver, just the next voice on the line. Story 2. They say the road talks if you listen long enough. I used to laugh at that. 20 years behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, and I'd heard every tale out there. Jackalopes, phantom hitchhikers, ghost towns that vanish in the daylight. All just stories told over cheap coffee and CB chatter, meant to keep the boredom at bay. But what happened on Highway 84 last fall? That wasn't a story. That was real. It started like any other long haul. Texas to Oregon, hauling a load of steel beams, miles of cracked asphalt under a starless sky. I had the radio low, more static than music, and my thermos was still half full. Around 2:17 a.m., just past the old Miller's Junction, I noticed something odd. The road got quiet. Not the usual silence, but a heavy stillness. The kind that crawls over your skin and makes you check the rear view for no reason at all. I did nothing but night. Then my lights flickered once, just a quick pulse, enough to make me tap the dashboard and mutter under my breath. But when I looked up again, it was there. Out of the pitch black behind me, headlights flared, bright, angry, and far too close. A rig, black as spilled oil, massive, bearing down fast. I reached for the CB. Breaker 19, anyone westbound got eyes on this psycho tailgater? No answer, just that damn static like a whisper I couldn't quite catch. I sped up. The black rig matched me. Faster, faster still. My speedometer hit 85 and the wheel trembled in my grip. The black truck didn't care. It crept closer until I could see the shimmer of heat rising from its chrome grille, the deep growl of its engine vibrating through my own cab. And then it vanished. No brake lights, no swerve. 1 second, it was there, about to ram me into the ditch, and the next, gone. I jerked the wheel, heart hammering, and pulled onto the shoulder tires, screaming in protest. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at the empty stretch of road behind me. No sign of it, just fog creeping in from the tree line, thick and slow like smoke curling from something still burning. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I imagined it. Then I saw the imprint. Right there in my rear view on the glass was a perfect, greasy handprint. 5 long fingers stretched like they were dragging down the window. I hadn't seen anyone. I hadn't stopped. But someone, or something, had been right there. The engine hummed beneath me, eager to move on. So was I. But I knew something had changed. That night, I left more than tire tracks on that road. I left behind the part of me that didn't believe in the black rig. I told myself I was done with night hauls after that first encounter. Switched to local runs, daylight only, safer, simpler. But the money dried up fast, and bills didn't care about nightmares. 6 weeks later, I was back behind the wheel of my old Freightliner, headed north through Oregon, a logging town run with a tight delivery window. I didn't like it, but the road doesn't ask if you're ready. I left Bend just after midnight, clouds thick and low. They swallowed the moon, and the highway ahead looked like a vein running through a blackened world. As the miles passed, a soft mist rolled in, clinging to the edges of the windshield. The further I drove, the thicker it got, until the trees vanished into white and the road became a fading ribbon beneath my tires. That's when I saw it again. It started as a flicker in the mirrors, headlights too bright, too high. They danced in the fog, unfocused beams that didn't move like normal lights should. I blinked, hoping it was a reflection or a hallucination brought on by fatigue. But it wasn't. The same rig, blacker than the night itself. No markings, no plates, just mass and menace. It emerged from the fog like a predator from the deep. I watched in stunned silence as it closed the distance between us with unnatural speed. I floored the accelerator. My truck roared, gears grinding. The RPM screamed. The black rig didn't fall back. It kept coming. Then, blast! The air horn, deep, ragged like a scream torn from metal, shattered the silence. I swerved, almost tipping the load, tires slipping the wet pavement. For a second, I was sure I was going to jackknife. But the wheel held. I straightened out, breathing hard, knuckles white on the leather grip. And again, it was gone. No tire screech, no passing blur. Just empty road and fog curling like fingers across my windshield. But this time, it left something behind. As I slowed to catch my breath, the radio, dead for miles, sputtered to life. A voice crackled through, broken and slow, like it was climbing out of a grave. Not done, not yet. I stared at the speaker, heart thudding in my ears. I hadn't touched the dial. The voice faded into static again. For the rest of that night, I kept going, never stopped, not even for fuel. I saw the headlights once more around mile marker 307, distant and steady like eyes in the dark, watching, waiting. It wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was a message, a warning. The black rig hadn't followed me by accident. It had marked me, and it was coming back. They say fear fades with time. Maybe for most folks, it does. But not when you're a trucker. Not when your whole life is a map of endless roads. And one of those roads holds something that knows your name. 3 months passed. I avoided night hauls again, switched rigs, even repainted my cab, changed my routes, my stops, my radio frequency. But the fear never left. It sat in the pit of my gut like old diesel, heavy, cold, impossible to flush out. Then came the call. Dispatch said they had a rush job, high pay, single trailer, tight window, route, Interstate 70, cutting through the Utah desert. The very mention twisted something deep in my stomach. I almost said no. I should have, but I didn't. The trailer was already hitched when I got there. No markings, no manifest. The lot manager just shrugged and said, "It's sealed. Don't ask, don't open." I laughed it off, forced a joke about mafia deliveries, but something about the way that trailer sat, silent, still, wrong, made my skin crawl. The road was quiet, too quiet. No other rigs, no taillights ahead, no headlights behind. I was alone under the full moon, its silver glow flattening the desert into a strange, endless plain. Time slipped by. I stopped checking the clock. The radio didn't work. The GPS froze. The further I drove, the more I felt like I wasn't moving forward at all, like the road had stopped going somewhere and just turned into a loop. Then it happened. A hum, low, mechanical, growing behind me. I looked in the mirror, and there it was, the black rig. But this time, it wasn't chasing. It was keeping pace, just a few hundred feet back, sliding through the moonlight like a shadow made of metal and smoke. Its lights didn't flicker. They stared, white-hot beams cutting through the dust, locking onto my cab like a predator locking eyes with prey. I gripped the wheel tighter, didn't speak, didn't blink. I knew better now. I knew it fed on acknowledgement. Then my trailer shifted. A loud metal bang shook the whole rig. I thought I'd lost a tire or busted a hitch. I pulled to the shoulder, breath frozen in my lungs. The black rig stayed in the mirror, didn't move, didn't vanish. I stepped out, heart pounding, flashlight in hand. The trailer door was open. That sealed trailer, the one nobody was supposed to touch, was swinging wide in the desert wind. But there was no wind, just heat and silence and something waiting. Inside, it was empty. No cargo, just long dark scrapes across the floorboards like something had crawled out. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. The flashlight flickered, and from behind me, I heard the unmistakable groan of an engine, that deep, thunderous growl I knew all too well. I turned slowly. The black rig was right behind me, closer than it had ever been. But there was no driver, only darkness behind the windshield. A shape, tall, still, watching. I backed up, steps uneven, throat dry as sand, climbed into my cab and slammed the door. When I looked again, nothing. No truck, no lights, no sound. but the trailer door had closed itself. I drove the rest of the route without stopping, delivered the empty trailer to an empty yard. Nobody signed for it. Nobody ever called about it again. Whatever I'd hauled through that desert wasn't cargo. And whatever had come out, it wasn't finished. It's been a year since the desert haul. A year of waking up at 3:17 a.m. every night, drenched in sweat, headlights burned into my eyelids. I quit the long runs, sold the truck, tried to go back to something like normal, short local deliveries, daylight hours only. I even moved, got away from the old routes. Didn't matter. The black rig found me anyway. 2 nights ago, I got a call from a dispatcher I didn't recognize. Claimed they got my number from an old client. Said it was a one-time gig and they'd pay in cash, double the usual rate. I should have hung up, but the voice, there was something about it. Calm, too calm, like it had no business being human. The job, simple. Drive an empty flatbed from a warehouse outside Reno to a yard in Idaho. No manifests, no questions. Just like last time. I told myself I was just being paranoid. Told myself it was just a drive. But the moment I stepped back into a cab, rented, unfamiliar, I felt it. That pressure in the air, that weight behind my ribs, like something had been waiting on the other side of silence. The warehouse was abandoned when I arrived. No lights, no gate. Just a flatbed trailer already hooked up. I checked the tires, lights, everything. It all looked clean, almost too clean, like it hadn't been touched by dust or time. I pulled onto the road just before midnight. No traffic, no sound. The highway cut through black hills like a scar. No moon, no stars, just the white lines flashing beneath me, vanishing into the dark. About an hour in, I saw them, those headlights again, just a shimmer in the mirror at first. Distant, but steady. Always the same distance behind me, no matter how fast or slow I went. I turned off the radio. Didn't matter. It was just static anyway. Rolled down the window. All I heard was wind. No engine behind me. No tires on asphalt. Just presence. Then, out of nowhere, a sign lit up by my high beams. No exit next 66 miles. I'd never seen that sign before. Checked my GPS. Blank screen. I slowed down. The air got colder. That's when the engine cut out. No sputter. No warning. Just silence. I coasted to a stop, heart pounding. Tried the ignition. Nothing. Headlights dimmed, then died. The only thing still glowing was the rearview mirror, and in it, the black rig right behind me. No sound, no driver, just its shadowed grill inches from my trailer. I opened the door and stepped out. Every instinct screamed run, but my legs moved on their own. The night was still. Then the horn blew, a deafening, ragged roar that shook the ground beneath me. I stumbled back, tripping over the roadside gravel, catching myself just before I fell. When I looked up, the black rig was gone, but the trailer I'd been pulling, it was open. Again, inside wasn't empty this time. There was a seat, a single seat, facing backward, and something moved in the shadows beside it. Something long and narrow and familiar, a steering wheel. The trailer wasn't for cargo. It was a cab, a place to drive, and the engine started behind me, not mine, not any truck I'd ever driven. Just the low, deep growl of something ancient turning over, waiting. Then headlights lit the road ahead from inside my trailer, and slowly, without touching the throttle, I began to roll forward. Story 3. The engine roared beneath me like a restless beast, the wind slapping the side of the rig as I barreled through the jagged curves of La Rumorosa. My hands gripped the wheel tighter with every mile. My wife's voice echoed in my head. "It's time. The baby's coming." I had promised her I'd be there. No way I was going to miss this. Not for a busted road, not for the endless desert, not for anything. The dusk swallowed the sun in streaks of blood-red light, the rocks casting long, jagged shadows across the crumbling edge of the highway. The CB radio hissed with dead air. No trucks ahead, no trucks behind. Just me, the road, and the heavy silence broken only by the wind howling like it had something to say. That last curve came too fast. Tires shrieked, a blur of guardrail. Metal screamed as I lost control. The world twisted in a spin of flashing lights and crushed steel. Then silence. Just the ticking of the engine cooling down and the frantic pounding of my heart. But somehow, I was fine. I crawled out through the shattered door, glass crunching under my boots. The rig lay twisted, a wounded giant gasping its last. I waited for help. Minutes dragged into hours. No cars, no lights. Just the desert, endless and uncaring. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I opened my eyes, the sun was gone. The cold night had crept in. I stood and tried walking, my legs stiff, body aching. Every step felt like I was sinking into something deeper. I walked until my breath burned in my lungs and my feet gave out. That's when I saw it, my truck, right where I left it, just as broken, just as still. How? I'd walked for hours. I froze. Something was wrong, something out of place in the air. I wasn't just lost. I was caught in something I didn't understand. And as the stars turned overhead and the desert wind picked up again, I realized I wasn't alone out there. Something was watching, and it wasn't in a hurry to let me go. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the wreck, my wreck, as if seeing it for the first time. The twisted steel glinted cold under the moonlight. The cab smashed against a boulder like a crushed soda can. The desert was deathly quiet. Not even the wind spoke anymore. Only the sound of my own breathing filled the void. I turned and walked again. I followed the same cracked road, marked by my own boot prints in the dust. I was sure of it. I passed the same jagged rocks, the same dented road signs, even the same faded billboard for some long-closed gas station. The night didn't change. The stars above didn't move. It was like time had frozen in place, or worse, like I had stepped out of it altogether. After what felt like miles, the shadows thickened, my legs weak beneath me. My throat was dry, lips cracked. Still, I pushed forward, desperate to find anything, anyone. Then, out of the darkness ahead, something shimmered faintly. Hope surged. But as I approached, my stomach twisted. It was the crash site. Again, the mangled rig, tilted at the same awful angle, the broken glass, the same rock stained with something dark. My own footsteps from before had circled back. Or maybe I'd never left. I dropped to my knees. I yelled, cursed, slammed my fists into the dirt until they bled. But there was no answer, no headlights on the horizon, just silence, and a growing sense that the road itself was alive, toying with me. I tried again. I left the crash behind, took a different direction, climbed a rocky slope beside the road, slid down the other side, found another road and followed it, sure I'd finally broken the loop. Hours passed, but it always ended the same. I came back every time. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. Not that I felt hunger anymore. The days never came. The moon never moved. I stopped sweating, stopped shivering. Something was changing in me. Then, one night, if you could call it that, I saw movement on the horizon, headlights, a truck, real. A sound that wasn't my own heartbeat for once. I stumbled to the edge of the road, waving, shouting. The driver slowed. He was young, wide-eyed. He rolled down his window, eyebrows raised in surprise. "You all right, viejo?" he asked. I opened my mouth, ready to speak, ready to tell him everything. But before a single word left my lips, he blinked, and I was gone. Gone from beside the road, gone from his view, and standing again beside the wreck like I had never left. That's when I knew I wasn't lost. I was trapped, and worse, I was fading. It was the 5th time, maybe the 50th, I watched a truck pass me by. I'd long given up counting. Sometimes they slowed, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they looked right through me, like I wasn't even there, like I was just part of the desert. But on one strange night, something changed. The wind had died completely, leaving the air thick, unmoving. The moon hung low and yellow, casting shadows that seemed to twitch when I wasn't watching. I stood by the roadside like I always did now, thumb raised, posture still. I wasn't sure when I started doing that, if it was my idea or something the road had planted in me. All I knew was it felt right, like it gave me a purpose, a rhythm in the endless loop. That's when I saw the rig coming. Its headlights cut through the dark like twin suns, humming closer with a familiar diesel growl. As it neared, I felt something like warmth, like memory, brush against my chest. It was faint, like a whisper of life. The truck slowed, brakes hissed, gravel crunched. The door creaked open. "You okay, senor?" the young driver asked, leaning out. His voice was cautious but kind. I looked up at him and stepped forward, my boots silent on the dirt. I nodded slowly and climbed into the cab. The seat was soft. The warmth hit me like a wave, and for a second I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the end of it. Maybe I'd finally be free. He glanced at me a few times as we drove. I tried to speak, to explain, but the words stuck in my throat like smoke. Still, I could see it in his eyes. Something about me was ringing bells he couldn't quite place. We rolled along the narrow pass, his headlights dancing over the canyon walls. I stared out the window. The world looked different from inside a moving truck, more alive, more real. I felt like I'd broken through. Then I looked down. My hands, they weren't quite solid. I could see the glow of the dashboard through them. My reflection in the side mirror was faint, like fogged glass. My breath caught. The driver looked over again, slower this time. He blinked once, twice. Then I was gone, just like that. Vanished from the passenger seat. He slammed the brakes, jumped out, shouting into the night, looking around in a panic. But there was nothing, just the empty road, the stars, the wind that had finally returned. I stood again where I always did, beside the wreck, thumb raised, waiting. And I understood then. I wasn't supposed to ride. I wasn't supposed to leave. I was part of the road now, part of the legend. And I was beginning to forget who I used to be. I don't know how long it's been now. Days, years, decades. Time's a ghost here, just like me. It doesn't move forward. It coils, loops, writhes like smoke in the night. I've come to know every crack in this cursed stretch of highway, every bend that whispers, every boulder that casts a too long shadow. But I've also learned something darker. I'm not alone. They say La Rumorosa speaks. That's a lie. It listens. Sometimes I see other things on the road. Not trucks, Not people, shadows, shapes in the rear-view mirrors of passing rigs. They move too fast to catch, too slow to forget. I see myself reflected in chrome bumpers, faded, flickering like a radio between stations. A face I almost remember, but the eyes are always wrong, hollow, watching. One night, a convoy passed. 3 trucks, engines snarling like wolves. The first 2 didn't stop. The third one, he slowed. A grizzled man behind the wheel, smoking, humming a tune I used to know. He didn't see me until the last second. Brakes locked. The rig skidded. I didn't move. Couldn't. The cab missed me by inches. But he swore he hit something. He got out, pale and shaking, flashlight cutting through the desert dark. He found nothing but dust and a cold wind that hadn't been there before. That's when he checked his mirror and saw my hand on his shoulder. I didn't mean to touch him. I don't remember deciding to, but I felt it, that pull, something in me reaching out like instinct, hungry, cold. He screamed, ran, left the door open, light still on. His engine idled for hours until the battery died. I stayed behind, sitting in the cab, gripping the wheel like I used to, pretending it meant something. But I felt it now. What the others must have felt before me. I wasn't just a ghost. I was becoming part of the road, of the past, of La Rumorosa itself. Now, sometimes I don't stand by the wreck. Sometimes I'm just there, suddenly ahead of a driver, thumb raised, face blank, waiting. Other times, I'm in the mirror, just behind the shoulder. A glance too long and I'm gone. But something cold lingers in the cab for miles. They talk about me on the radios now. The trucker, the man who waves. Some still try to help. Most don't stop anymore. But they see me. They all see me. And the road, it never lets them forget. Story 4. I never thought I'd fear the sound of an engine. I used to find it comforting, like a heartbeat of the open road. But everything changed on June 19th, 1987. That was the day the machines woke up. It started as a low rumble, faint, almost like distant thunder. I was manning the grill at the Dixie Boyd truck stop, halfway through a shift that smelled of bacon grease and diesel. The usual crowd was there. Bubba cracking jokes by the fryer, a few truckers nursing their coffee, and a young couple arguing quietly over a map in the corner booth. The kind of day that slips into memory without a ripple. Then we heard it. Tires screeching, a scream. The glass door shuddered as a pickup slammed into a pump outside. We rushed to the window just in time to see it reverse, on its own. No driver. The engine snarled like it was alive. People ran. One guy, a delivery driver, tried to wrestle control of his semi, but the door slammed shut on his arm. The truck dragged him screaming across the asphalt before backing over him with mechanical precision. We froze. The machines weren't malfunctioning. They were hunting. That was just the beginning. By dusk, the gas station was surrounded. Tankers, semis, tow trucks, massive, glinting monsters. Their engines revved in unison, like predators circling prey. One of them, a platform truck with a mounted gun, where it came from, I still don't know, sat like a silent king among the herd. We barricaded the diner, chairs, tables, anything we could shove against the windows. No one knew what to say. Bubba tried the CB radio, but it only hissed. Our phones were dead. Even the jukebox refused to play, blinking its lights like some cursed relic. The power went out not long after. Then the horn started, a slow, rhythmic blare. Morse code, someone muttered. It was trying to talk. We decoded the message, hearts pounding. Fuel, refill, obey. Outside, the trucks revved again, louder now, as if they knew we'd read their message. Then the platform truck rolled forward, its mounted gun twitching. Bubba stood his ground, shouting something brave and stupid, but he didn't get the chance to finish. The gun lit up with a stuttering flash. He fell before we could scream. We huddled behind the counter as bullets tore through the walls. Glass exploded. Grease caught fire. It wasn't a siege. It was a massacre waiting to happen. And I knew, somehow, this wasn't just coincidence or malfunction. Something far beyond our world had turned the gears. Something that had slithered in on the tail of a passing comet. We weren't just fighting machines. We were fighting purpose. And it had only just begun. The diner stank of sweat, fear, and scorched metal. Bubba's blood was still wet on the floor, pooling near the shattered window where he fell. We hadn't spoken in minutes. No one dared. Outside, the trucks waited, engines humming like wolves licking their chops in the dark. The platform truck, its mounted gun now aimed directly at the front door, sat motionless, daring us to test its patience. And it didn't need much. Every few minutes, it would let out a short burst from its horn. Cold, mechanical Morse. Fuel! 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 They weren't just hunting us. They needed us. That made it worse. The idea that these machines, possessed by something alien and unfeeling, saw us not just as prey, but as tools. Tools to keep them alive. We took shifts, peeking out the narrow blinds. Some of the trucks prowled in slow circles. A tow truck scraped its hook along the asphalt, dragging it back and forth like claws across a coffin lid. It wasn't just intimidation. It was communication. We found a radio in the back pantry. Shortwave, dusty, but working. Deke, the kid from the couple who'd arrived just before the chaos, managed to string a battery together from flashlights and car parts. He fiddled with knobs, trying to catch any signal, only static, except once. A crackled voice came through, barely audible over the interference. Wilmington. Held out. Only hours. Boats. Avoid roads. Then silence. That was the first glimmer of hope. If someone else had made it, maybe we could too. We started whispering plans, careful not to let the truck see movement through the glass. That night, the machines changed tactics. It began with lights, headlights flashing in bizarre sequences. Then the power roared to life again, not ours, theirs. The jukebox screamed back on, playing a warped rock song on loop, until we smashed it with a fire extinguisher. The fryers sizzled despite being unplugged, and the microwave, it turned on by itself over and over until it exploded in a fireball. They were mocking us, learning us, testing our reactions. Around midnight, the gun truck sent out another Morse message. Refuel or die. No one moved. Then the truck fired again, through the walls, through the booths. No targets, just punishment. A piece of shrapnel grazed Deke's leg. He didn't cry out, just clenched his jaw and held on. Brave kid. We dragged him to the storage room, wrapped his wound with ripped aprons. That was the moment Bill, our cook-turned-leader, said what we'd all been dreading. We'll have to refuel them, he said, or none of us make it to morning. We argued, we yelled, but deep down, we knew the truth. This was their siege, and it was working. The morning would come. But if we were still in here by then, we wouldn't be. Dawn crept over the diner in a sickly orange haze, but the sun brought no comfort, just shadows stretching long across the parking lot where the trucks still stood like statues of war. We hadn't slept. Not really. Every creak of metal, every gust of wind brushing against the building felt like the start of another assault. Bill stared out through a bullet-pocked window, arms crossed, jaw locked. His shirt was stained with grease and blood, and he hadn't blinked in what felt like hours. He wasn't a soldier. None of us were. But the look in his eyes said he'd become something close. "They want fuel," he said again. "We give it, just enough to buy time. Then we run." It sounded suicidal. Maybe it was. But staying inside was a slow death. And the trucks knew it. They hadn't moved since the last burst of gunfire hours ago. Just sat there, idling like predators half asleep, confident in their dominance. We opened the side door slowly, metal, groaning like a scream held in too long. Bill, me, and Joe, the big rig driver with the busted shoulder, stepped out first, gas cans in hand. No sudden moves, no talking, just the sharp stink of fuel in the morning air. The platform truck rolled forward an inch, like it was watching, judging. Its mounted weapon swiveled but didn't fire. The message was clear: comply or die. We started pumping. One by one, we filled them up. Massive semis, tow trucks, armored vans. Each one idled in grim silence before slowly reversing to let the next one in. The hiss of fuel, the gurgle in their tanks. It was like feeding beasts at a zoo, except the bars were gone, and the keepers were the ones trapped. Every time I tightened a gas cap, I half expected a grill to open wide and bite down. But they let us work. They let us live. For now. Inside the diner, Deke was rigging something with what little wiring and batteries he could scavenge. He'd found a CB frequency with repeating pulses, like a beacon. Alien, maybe. Not from Earth. That much was clear. His theory? The machines were being coordinated. Remotely? Bill took that idea and built a plan on it. "We take out the command unit," he said, eyes shifting toward the platform truck, "and we might break the link." It sounded insane, but so did everything else that had happened since June 19th. We agreed, mostly because there was no better choice. That night, under cover of darkness and thunderclouds moving in from the east, we prepared. Joe distracted the trucks with another round of refueling while Bill slipped into the garage bay, where he'd hidden a duffel bag he'd found in an abandoned military transport. It held the grenade. Old, rusted, but real. Timing was everything. We watched from the diner as Bill ducked low and crept across the lot, weaving between the trucks like a ghost through a graveyard. The gun truck didn't move. Not at first. But as Bill got closer, the turret twitched, then swiveled. I held my breath. Joe screamed something, a distraction. The moment it turned its attention toward the yelling, Bill leapt onto its side panel, scrambled up like a man possessed, and shoved the grenade into the intake vent beneath the mounted weapon. He jumped, rolled. The gun fired, but too late. The explosion lit up the night. Fire bloomed high, metal shrapnel flying in every direction. The platform truck groaned as if wounded, then collapsed into itself, burning, buckling, dead. And just like that, everything stopped. The engines around us fell silent. Lights dimmed. One by one, the trucks shut down, like puppets whose strings had been cut. We didn't cheer. We couldn't. The silence was heavier than the noise had ever been. But we knew we had bought ourselves a chance. Tomorrow, we would run. Smoke curled from the mangled wreck of the platform truck. Its machine gun melted into a crooked grin of twisted steel. The others, Those mindless giants that had circled us for 2 full days sat motionless in the dawn light. Engines dead, headlights dark. It felt like breathing for the first time after nearly drowning. But we knew better than to celebrate. Not yet. Bill was bruised, bloody, but alive. We pulled him inside, patched him up with what little we had. No one spoke much. The silence outside was too unnatural, a trap waiting to spring again. We scavenged fast, food, water, maps. Joe hot-wired the last boat trailer rig behind the diner, the one the trucks hadn't touched. Maybe they saw it as one of their own. Maybe it just hadn't received orders. We didn't care. That's when we heard it. Faint at first, like a low growl carried on the wind, then louder. From beyond the tree line, more machines, engines snarling like wolves chasing the scent of prey. We didn't wait to count them. We ran. Joe drove, white-knuckled, barreling down the dirt access road behind the station, dodging wrecked cars and splintered signposts. I rode shotgun, rifle shaking in my grip. Bill and Deke were in the back, eyes locked on the rear view, watching the forest spit out a convoy of fresh nightmares. Bulldozers, garbage trucks, a harvester with spinning blades glinting in the morning sun. They didn't care about the platform truck. They didn't mourn it. They just picked up the hunt. We reached the dock half a mile south, barely more than a splintered pier and a moored fishing boat bobbing in the shallows. A gift or bait. Joe reversed the truck to the edge and we bailed out. Bill started the outboard motor as I unhooked the line. Behind us, the first truck burst through the clearing, crashing through a line of pines like they were cardboard. Its horn blared, not Morse, just rage. The boat sputtered to life as the harvester sliced through the dock behind us, metal teeth chewing up wood like paper. The shock wave nearly threw us overboard, but we pushed off, engine roaring, and the water finally opened between us and them. The trucks stopped at the shore, watched, waited. The harvester revved once more, then fell silent. For the first time, it looked confused, powerless. Out on the water, everything changed. The signal, the strange pulse that hummed through the trucks, faded like static, disappearing from a radio dial. We felt it leave, like a pressure lifted from the back of our skulls. The comet's tail was moving on, taking its poison with it. On the island, there were no machines, no roads, just trees, wind, and waves. The sky above was clean, but we didn't relax, not fully, because somewhere out there, on some forgotten highway, an engine might still be running, still listening, still waiting for the next signal. And if it comes back, we'll be ready. Story 5. I always thought legends were just that. Stories stitched together by bored locals and overactive imaginations. But that was before Roger Kavitz dared us to test the tale of Clinton Road. That stretch of cracked pavement winding through the woods of rural New Jersey had long been whispered about in gas station corners and school lunchrooms. The phantom truck, the farmer who never left. But it was all just talk until that night. We were 5 in total. Roger, the ringleader, with a crooked grin. Tessa, brave enough to follow him anywhere. Ben and Danny, the twins who never backed down from a challenge. And me, Jim Ford, the so-called voice of reason. We packed into Roger's red Firebird just before midnight, tires screeching as we left the edge of town and plunged into the dark stretch of Clinton Road. The forest closed in fast, branches clawing at the windows, the air thick and strange. fog settled like smoke across the hood as Roger killed the headlights for a second, laughing when Tessa punched his arm. "You scared?" he teased. "We're just getting started." Then came the moment the car slowed near Dead Man's Curve, where the legend claimed Giles Jones always appeared. Roger rolled down the window, stuck his hand out, and honked the horn once, twice, 3 times. At first, nothing, just the hum of the engine and the rustle of trees. We all leaned forward, eyes straining through the murk. And then, out of the fog ahead, 2 beams of light ignited, bright, angry, and far too high off the ground. Roger cursed and threw the Firebird into reverse. "It's just someone messing with us," he said, though his voice was too tight to believe. The black pickup roared forward, engine howling like an animal, headlights searing our retinas. We spun around, tires flinging gravel as the Firebird screamed down the road. But the truck was faster. It surged behind us, bumper to bumper, its shape becoming clearer with each bounce of the taillights. It was old and rusted, sides covered in fresh white streaks. Paint. Our paint. The initials we had sprayed when we found the abandoned truck in Giles's yard earlier that week. A shotgun blast shattered the rear window. We ducked. Tessa screamed. Roger swerved as another shot cracked the silence. I looked back once. I wish I hadn't. The driver's face, if it was a face, glowed a pale, ghastly hue. Hollow eyes locked on us. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. And then everything turned sideways. Roger lost control. The Firebird spun, flipping into the ditch with a crunch of metal and bone. The last thing I remember was the sound of heavy boots on gravel, slow and deliberate, and the low creak of a truck door opening. I woke up alone. The others were gone, not missing, just gone. The car was crushed, barely recognizable. And when the police found us, they said I was lucky. But lucky didn't explain what I saw in the wreckage. The truck was never seen again. But the initials, our initials, were burned into the Firebird's door. And on the road behind it, a crimson smear stretched like a handprint, dragging toward the woods. Some say we imagined it, that we were drunk or high or just plain stupid. But I know what we saw. I know what followed us. Clinton Road isn't just haunted, it's owned, and Giles Jones doesn't like trespassers, dead or alive. I couldn't sleep after the crash, not because of the pain, though the scars on my legs still burn when it rains, but because I kept hearing it, that engine, that shotgun blast, the scream that never quite finished. They told me I was lucky to be alive. They didn't see the way the metal had folded around me like fingers. They didn't smell the burnt rubber or feel the air turn ice cold just before the truck vanished. In the weeks that followed, I tried to tell myself it was a dream. Shock, trauma, imagination feeding off grief. But then came the white marks. It started small. The morning after I got back home, I found a faint white smear across my window. Looked like paint. I wiped it off with my sleeve, told myself it was nothing. But the next day, it was back. Thicker, like someone had dragged 2 fingers straight across the glass. Then came the sound. Late at night, when everything was quiet and the town was tucked into bed, I'd hear tires crunching gravel just beyond the tree line behind my house. Never closer, never farther, just waiting. One evening, I walked outside with a flashlight, heart pounding against my ribs. The light cut through the trees, and there, just for a second, I saw the shimmer of chrome, a fender black as a starless sky, and right above it, a streak of white. Letters, a J and a C, scraped across the metal like someone had etched them in with a bone-dry brush. I ran. The next day I begged my parents to move. They wouldn't hear it. "Jim, you need help," they said. "You're just scared." Of course I was scared. They hadn't seen the blood on the seat. They hadn't seen Roger's cap, still stuck in the crushed windshield like it had been nailed there. But I knew what I saw. And more than that, I knew who saw me. I started digging, not just through newspaper clippings, but through the files no one talked about. At the county records office, I found a yellowed folder with Giles Jones's name on it, a report from the 60s, trespassers, complaints, and something else. Responding officer advised caution. Subject increasingly aggressive. Claims trespassers are stealing his land even in death. That last phrase was underlined twice. I found photos too. Grainy black and whites of the truck before it was abandoned. It looked just like the one that chased us, right down to the cracked grill and mismatched side mirrors. But something chilled me to the bone. In one photo, taken years after Giles had died, the truck appeared parked beside his collapsing barn, and on its door, barely visible, the initials RC and BD in smeared paint. The same ones we sprayed that night. But that photo was dated 6 months before we ever went near the place. Something didn't add up. Or maybe something added too well. I showed the photo to the sheriff. He told me not to come back. That night, the white paint returned, this time on my bedroom door. 3 letters, thick and dripping, J.F. mine. Clinton Road had followed me home. Or maybe I'd never left it. I should have left town. I knew that. But something inside me wouldn't let go. Not guilt, not grief. Something deeper, like a hook in my spine pulling me back to the place it all began. Clinton Road didn't just take my friends. It marked me. And I couldn't pretend otherwise. Not with the white streak showing up on every surface I touched. Not with the constant sound of an idling engine outside my window that stopped the moment I dared look. I needed answers. Not from files, not from stories passed around campfires. I needed to see the truck again. It took 3 days of searching through town maps and old property records to find it. Giles Jones's land lay behind a thicket of black birch trees near mile marker 9, no longer listed on any active zoning document. They called it condemned, forgotten. But nothing about that place felt forgotten. I drove there just before sunset. The trail was nearly invisible, choked with vines and the scent of wet bark. My car couldn't make it far. I walked the last stretch on foot, boots crunching brittle leaves as the light bled from the sky. The farmhouse appeared first, splintered walls, a collapsed roof, and windows like dead eyes. But beyond it, in a sunken patch of dirt, smothered in weeds, sat the truck, the black pickup. It hadn't rusted like it should have. Time had weathered the barn and the land, but not this. The body gleamed dully under a thick layer of grime, and on its side, glowing faintly in the fading light, were the names. Ours. RCTHBDDDJF. The white paint was cracked now, but not faded, like it had dried only yesterday. I stepped closer, heart battering my ribs like it was trying to escape. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe to touch the truck and prove it was all some prank, some grim leftover from a story gone too far. But as soon as my fingers grazed the door handle, the engine growled. Not started, growled. It rumbled through the ground, a deep, unnatural vibration that made the hairs on my neck stand straight. The passenger door swung open on its own, slow and creaking, and inside, across the bench seat, I saw something sitting. Not someone, just something. A wide-brimmed hat, a pair of cracked work gloves, and a shotgun. I stepped back, but the ground behind me gave way. I fell onto my back, gasping as the truck's headlights flared to life. No key, no driver, just blinding beams locked on me like the gaze of a predator. Then came the sound again. Boots on dirt. Not mine. I scrambled to my feet. The door slammed shut. The headlights flickered once, twice, and then the truck surged forward with a roar. I ran. Through brambles, thorns tearing my jacket, feet pounding the path in blind panic. Behind me, the engine howled like a storm. Branches snapped, tires tore into earth, and through it all I heard the sharp, deafening crack of a shotgun. Bark exploded beside my shoulder. I dove behind a fallen tree, breath frozen in my throat. Silence fell. No engine, no footsteps, only the hiss of wind through dying leaves. When I finally dared to lift my head, the truck was gone, but the gloves and hat now rested at the base of the tree, neatly placed, waiting. I didn't take them. I didn't look back. I ran until I hit the road, where my car sat untouched, like none of it had happened. But it had happened. The bruises, the cuts, the scorch mark on the back of my jacket, where the shotgun blast had nearly reached me, none of it was imagined. I drove straight home and didn't sleep for 3 days. I kept my lights on. I nailed my windows shut. But none of it helped, because the next morning, the hat was on my porch, and under it, carved into the wood, "Next time, don't run." I didn't tell anyone about the hat or the message carved into my porch. By then, I knew the truth wouldn't matter. The town had already chosen to forget what happened on Clinton Road. The wreck was written off as reckless driving, the deaths as a tragic accident. My story, a trauma-fueled fantasy, but I knew better. The paint kept showing up, white streaks on my car, on my jacket, even once across my bathroom mirror. I scrubbed them away. They came back, each time thicker, messier, closer to forming letters. I tried driving in the opposite direction of Clinton Road every time I left the house, but somehow I always ended up near it. Whether it was a detour or a wrong turn, the road pulled at me like a magnet made of regret. One morning, I found my front door wide open, not broken, just open. A set of muddy boot prints led from the steps to my kitchen table. On it sat a folded map. One road was circled in red, Clinton, and beside the map, a small object wrapped in cloth. The cracked rearview mirror from Roger's Firebird. I knew I wasn't getting out of this. Not alive, not clean. The road didn't want my silence. It wanted my return. That night, I packed a flashlight, a flare gun, and a crowbar. I didn't know what good any of it would do, but I needed something in my hands to keep them from shaking. I didn't take my car. I walked. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the fog clung to the trees like cobwebs. The air was so still it hurt my ears. The moment I stepped onto the cracked asphalt of Clinton Road, everything went quiet. No crickets, no breeze, not even the distant hum of traffic. I walked until I reached the curve. Dead Man's Curve. That's where it always began. I didn't need to honk. The truck appeared without warning. One moment the road was empty. The next its headlights exploded through the fog like two blazing eyes. The black pickup rolled to a stop just ahead, engine growling, breathing. And then the driver's door creaked open. Giles Jones was already sitting behind the wheel. He didn't step out. He didn't speak. He just looked at me through the windshield. Skin like withered bark, hat low over his face, one hand resting on the shotgun, the other gripping the wheel like it had grown there. The passenger door swung open toward me. I don't know why I got in. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was guilt. Or maybe the road had been waiting all this time to collect the last name on the list. The seat was ice cold. The door shut on its own. We drove. The truck moved slow at first, the forest crawling past in twisted shadows, then faster, faster. Trees blurred. The road seemed to stretch ahead endlessly, and I realized it wasn't Clinton Road anymore. Not the real one. This was something else. A space between places. Giles didn't speak. He just drove, but I felt it. Rage leaking off him like heat. Years of trespass, defiance, mockery. He wasn't protecting his land. He was punishing anyone who ever dared laugh at the legend. The truck veered off the road without turning. It just shifted like the forest gave way. Ahead, I saw it. What was left of the Firebird. The frame twisted into a tree, glass shattered, paint peeled. My friends were still inside, not bodies, memories, frozen and wrong. Roger's mouth opened mid-laugh, Tessa's eyes wide with panic. The twins slumped together like broken dolls. We passed them. The truck slowed. Ahead was a clearing filled with rusted-out cars, dozens of them, old, new, wrecked. Some were burned, some were torn in half, and every single one had white paint streaked across it. Initials, dates, sometimes just names. And in the middle of the clearing, an empty space, one just big enough for a Firebird or a passenger. The truck stopped. I looked at Giles. He didn't move, just turned his head slightly, enough for me to see one thing. His face was cracked, like dried earth. And behind those cracks, something pulsed. Not blood, not flesh, just darkness. He didn't need to speak. I understood. I reached for the door. It didn't open. Instead, the mirror, Roger's mirror, tilted down, showing me my own reflection. But my eyes weren't mine. They were his. The flare gun went off in my lap. Reflex. Desperation. Light exploded inside the cab. I leapt out as fire spilled across the seat. The truck didn't scream. It growled. It reversed fast, tires spinning, flames licking the edges of its hood, then vanished into the trees like it had never been there. I crawled back to the road, coughing, my hands burned. The sun was rising. Behind me, on the pavement, white paint slowly dried into 4 letters. JFD. Not just my name, my mark, my place. And from deep in the woods, I heard the engine start again. Story 6. The night air was thin and sharp as Francisco gripped the steering wheel, the headlights of his 18-wheeler cutting narrow tunnels through the swirling fog. La Rumorosa, they called it, a serpentine mountain pass carved into the Baja cliffs, where even seasoned truckers drove with clenched jaws and silent prayers. But Francisco had no time for fear. His wife was in labor back in Mexicali, and he had promised her he'd be there for the birth of their first child. He pressed harder on the gas. The engine groaned in protest as the truck labored uphill, tires screeching on the wet, cracked asphalt. Wind howled like a chorus of voices just beyond the edge of the road. But Francisco only leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. Just a few more kilometers. As he rounded a blind curve, a patch of loose gravel sent the rig sliding. The world pitched sideways. Metal shrieked, glass shattered. The trailer broke free, the cab flipped. Francisco felt the world collapse around him, a rolling vortex of noise and steel. Then, silence. When he came to, blood crusted one side of his face. The dashboard was crushed, but somehow he was still breathing. Crawling through the shattered window, he staggered onto the rocky slope. His headlights flickered behind him, painting the mountainside in broken shadows. Francisco stood, waving at passing headlights that never came. Hours bled into a lonely dawn, and still no one stopped. His radio was dead. His phone showed no signal. With nothing left but willpower, he began to walk, stumbling through the crags and underbrush, the stars above watching coldly. The desert stretched endlessly. Day turned to night again. Hunger gnawed at him, and thirst clawed his throat raw. He should have found a road by now, a sign, a single car, but all that surrounded him was dust, rocks, and the endless wind. On the third morning, delirious and desperate, he topped a small ridge and froze. There, at the bottom of the slope, lay his truck. The cab was still crushed. The trailer had split open, cargo spilled like bones. The same headlights blinked weakly in the morning light. He hadn't escaped the crash. He had never left. As Francisco staggered toward the wreckage, a cold certainty bloomed in his gut. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He shouted into the wind, but it swallowed his voice. Then everything faded, and when rescuers arrived days later, they found the trailer. They found the wreck. But of Francisco there was no trace, only torn fabric near the rocks and a strange pattern of footsteps, ones that led away into the desert, then circled back and simply ended. They say truckers feel when something's off, like a weight in the air, a pressure behind the eyes. I didn't believe any of that until the night I met him. It was near midnight, and I was hauling auto parts eastbound through La Rumorosa. The route's sharp as a serpent's back, and no place to be caught distracted. But just before the third switchback, the one with the twisted guardrail, I saw him. A man stood by the roadside, clothes tattered, face hollow, under the glow of my high beams. He raised one arm, slow and deliberate, palm out. At first I thought it was a trap. There had been stories, ambushes. But something about his eyes, they didn't plead. They mourned. I pulled over. He stepped closer, boots dragging on the gravel. "Please," he said, voice dry like sand scraping metal. My truck broke down a few kilometers back. I was trying to get to Mexicali, my wife. She's going into labor. I need someone to deliver this. He held out an old, worn leather pouch, heavy with cash. Just bring it to her. She lives on Calle de los Laureles, number 18. Please tell her Francisco is sorry. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd heard the stories. Every trucker who'd run this pass more than once had. Francisco, the ghost who flagged down drivers in the night. I stared at the man. He looked real. Dust clung to him. His breath clouded in the cold. But his eyes, there was something old in them. Not tired, expired. I nodded slowly. "All right, I'll take it." He closed my hand around the pouch and whispered, "Thank you." When I turned to get into the cab, a gust of wind howled down the pass. I glanced back. The roadside was empty. No footsteps in the dust. No man. I didn't sleep that night. Drove straight through, heart pounding louder than the engine. At sunrise, I reached the address. A small, time-worn house with sunflowers painted on the mailbox. An old woman opened the door. Her eyes flicked to the pouch, then to me. Who gave you this?" A man, I said. Said his name was Francisco. Said his truck broke down. She didn't speak for a long time, just stared at me like I'd stepped out of a grave. Then, with a tremble in her voice, she whispered, Francisco died 5 years ago. He never came home. They never found him. Inside, her walls were lined with faded photos. In one of them, I saw the man from the roadside. Same jacket, same eyes. I left the pouch on her table and walked away, heart cold and confused. That night, as I tried to sleep in my rig, the cabin lights flickered once, then steadied. The radio clicked on with a low hum, though I hadn't touched it. And then I saw him, in the side mirror, sitting in the passenger seat, face calm and grateful. Thank you, he whispered again. I blinked, and he was gone. But his presence didn't leave, and I began to learn something other drivers would soon confirm. Those who turned him away, those who left Francisco stranded, never made it out of the pass alive. I used to laugh at ghost stories. To me, they were just road fuel. Tales swapped between truckers at rest stops to keep us awake during midnight hauls. But after that night with Francisco, I stopped laughing, and I started listening. 3 weeks after I delivered that pouch to his widow, I crossed paths with another long-haul driver at a fuel station outside Tecate. His name was Marco, older, grizzled, the type who'd driven through enough darkness to smell fear before it even showed up. When I mentioned La Rumorosa, his hand froze halfway to his coffee. You saw him, didn't you? He asked quietly. I nodded. Francisco. He leaned in, voice low. Did you stop? Yes. He looked relieved. Then listen carefully. You keep stopping, every time. I didn't understand. Every time? Marco lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. He doesn't appear just once. He appears when he's not at peace, when someone else ignored him, when another trucker chose to drive past. I asked what happened to those who didn't stop. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he told me about a man named Arturo, another driver who ran the same freight route along the cliffs of La Rumorosa. A year ago, Arturo had been flagged down near the very curve where Francisco's truck once skidded off. Said he saw a man with torn clothes, waving desperately. Said it looked real, but didn't feel right. So he kept driving. 2 days later, Arturo's rig was found at the bottom of a ravine. No skid marks, no signs of a mechanical failure, just the smashed remains of a trailer and the smell of burned rubber on the rocks. He hadn't called for help, hadn't braked, like something took control or made him forget to try. Marco told me Arturo was one of many. Some went missing. Others crashed in perfect weather on wide turns, always near the same mile marker, always after refusing to stop. And then Marco said something I haven't forgotten. He doesn't want revenge. He wants to be remembered. He wants to get home. That night, I drove La Rumorosa again. I had to. Not for the freight, this time, for answers. The road wound like a coiled rope through the mountains, and I kept the lights high, every nerve on edge. Around the same bend, mile marker, 41, I saw him. Same figure, same outstretched hand. His face was drawn tighter this time, shadows deeper under the eyes. But his voice was calm. Please, he said, my wife. She needs this. I didn't hesitate. I opened the door. But this time, he didn't hand me anything. He just climbed in, silent, and looked out the window as if searching for something he'd lost long ago. We drove together in silence for nearly half an hour. Then, just before the final descent into Mexicali, he said, "Some don't believe I'm real. They think I'm just fog and fatigue. But you saw her. You delivered it. That makes you a part of the story now." He turned and looked me in the eye. "You'll have to carry it forward. Tell them. Warn them." I blinked, and he was gone. No door opened. No weight shifted. One moment, he was there. The next, nothing. But in the passenger seat, where the leather was cracked from years of use, a single footprint remained. Dusty, faded, and fresh. It happened again last night. I was driving northbound through La Rumorosa, carrying a load of medical supplies past midnight. The road was unusually quiet. No headlights behind, no tail lights ahead, just me and the rhythmic groan of the tires gripping the uneven asphalt. I knew the curve was coming. I always feel it before I see it now. The incline dips, the air goes still, and the truck hum shifts to a quieter tone, as if the entire pass knows he's near. Mile marker 41, same spot, same figure. Francisco stood at the edge of the road, one arm raised, eyes locked on my windshield. I didn't stop this time. Not because I was afraid, but because I'd already done my part. He didn't move as I passed. He just watched me go by, face unreadable. And then, as I checked my mirror, I saw headlights behind me that hadn't been there before. An old truck, battered, moving slowly, tires crunching gravel. At the next fuel station, I met another driver, young, maybe early 20s, new to the route. He looked pale, hands trembling as he sipped from a cup of lukewarm coffee. Didn't have to ask. I knew. "You saw him," I said quietly. He nodded. "He asked me to take something to his wife. I was going to, but then I got scared. It didn't feel right. So I kept driving. I didn't say anything, just stared at him waiting." He went on. "Now my GPS glitches every time I get near the mountain. Lights flicker in my cabin. And last night, I heard knocking from inside the sleeper. I asked if he still had the pouch. He looked stunned. 'How did you know about that?' I told him to go back, to find the house, to finish what he started. He didn't. Said he'd handle it later, that he needed sleep. By morning, word spread that a truck had gone over the edge. No brake marks, no calls for help. Just silence, and then the wreckage. Same curve, same place. I've come to understand something about Francisco. He isn't bound by revenge or anger or hate, but he remembers, and he expects us to remember him, not with stories told over cheap food and gas station diners, but with action, with follow-through, with respect. Now, when I drive through La Rumorosa, I keep my passenger seat clean. I never listen to music through that stretch. I watch for the figure at the curve and keep my foot steady, my heart open. Because some cargo doesn't weigh much, just a pouch, a memory, a name whispered into darkness. But if you leave it undelivered, it might follow you forever. Story 7. I remember the rain most of all. It came down in sheets, endless and cold, slicing through the darkness like needles. My boots were soaked through, my jacket heavy, and my thumb a useless flag in the black night. The road stretched ahead in both directions, empty and glistening, a ribbon of wet asphalt that seemed to vanish into nowhere. I'd been walking for hours, my last ride dropping me somewhere between forgotten towns in the middle of nowhere. No cell service, no cars, just the storm and the sound of my breathing. I started thinking maybe I'd have to sleep under the cover of an old billboard I'd passed. Something about roadside pecans and smoked jerky. That's when I saw the headlights, big and high, not like a regular car. The beams cut through the downpour like the eyes of some silent predator. The truck roared closer, then slowed, hissing as it stopped beside me. It was massive, chrome grille glinting even in the downpour, red pinstriping glowing faintly on the dark hull. Painted on the side, faded but proud, were two words in white: Phantom 309. The driver leaned over and opened the door. "Need a lift?" he asked, his voice low and steady, with a southern drawl that wrapped around me like a warm blanket. "Sure do," I answered, climbing up. The cab smelled like motor oil and worn leather, lived in and warm. I glanced at the driver. He was a big man, maybe mid-40s, with a broad face lined from years on the road. He wore a worn cap pulled low and a denim jacket with a patch that read Big Joe. "Name's Joe," he said, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Most folks just call me Big Joe." "Thanks for the ride," I told him, trying to settle my nerves. "Didn't think anyone would be out tonight." Big Joe smiled without looking over. "I keep rolling, rain or shine. Can't leave someone stranded on a night like this." The wheels hummed beneath us as we pushed through the storm, miles vanishing behind. He didn't talk much, and neither did I. There was something about the way he drove, calm, steady, like he knew every bump and bend in the road before it came. The storm seemed to quiet the farther we drove, the howling wind dulling to a whisper outside the cab. After a while, we pulled into a small roadside diner, fluorescent lights buzzing above cracked pavement, steam curling from vents on the roof. Joe nodded at me. "Get yourself something hot. Coffee's not bad here." He reached into his shirt pocket and handed me a dime. I stared at it. Smooth, worn thin, older than anything I'd seen in circulation. "You sure?" I asked. "Don't worry," he said. "Plenty more where that came from." I stepped down, walked toward the diner, and turned to thank him again. But the truck was gone. No engine rumble, no taillights, just an empty stretch of road and the rain starting up again. Inside the diner, I asked the cook if he'd seen the truck. He stopped pouring coffee. His hand hovered in the air for a moment. "You said you were riding with Big Joe?" he asked, voice tight. "Yeah, Phantom 309, I said, still holding the dime. "Why?" He didn't answer right away, just looked out the window, then back at me, his face pale. "Son," he said slowly, "Big Joe's been dead 10 years now. Crashed his rig swerving to save a school bus full of kids, right out there on that bend. No one drives Phantom 309 anymore, not unless they're trying to help someone make it out of that storm alive." The dime burned cold in my hand. I didn't sleep that night. The diner buzzed with the low murmur of old music and the clink of utensils, but none of it reached me. I just sat there, hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at the dime Big Joe had given me. Felt heavier now, like it carried a weight far beyond its metal. The cook avoided my eyes after telling me the story. I guess he thought I'd take off running or laugh it off. But I didn't do either. I stayed until sunrise, trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to believe that maybe, somehow, there'd been another explanation. A trick of the rain, a man with a similar name, a truck that looked like the Phantom 309 by coincidence. But the truth had settled over me like the fog that crawled along the edge of the windows. I'd ridden with a dead man. I left at dawn. No ride, no destination. Just the road ahead and that strange pull in my gut, the feeling like something unfinished was trailing behind me or waiting up ahead. I kept walking. Towns passed in a blur, gas stations, truck stops, long empty highways humming with silence. Sometimes I thought I saw him in other trucks, just a glint of chrome, the faint outline of a figure behind the wheel. But when I blinked, it was gone. It wasn't until 3 days later, at a trucker rest area outside a place called Rattleskin Hollow, that I heard his name again. I'd taken shelter beneath a rusted canopy beside a vending machine, listening to the static hum of distant traffic. A couple of older drivers were nearby, swapping stories like veterans swapping war tales. I kept to myself, but my ears perked up when one of them muttered, "Stranger said he saw the Phantom 309 last week. Thought he was going to freeze to death out past Dead Man Curve." The other man chuckled, but it was nervous sound. That ghost still haunting the roads? Thought he'd moved on by now. "Guess not," said the first. Said the cab was warm. Said the driver called himself Big Joe. Same as always. I stepped closer. "You talking about the Phantom 309? I asked, trying to sound casual. They both turned. One squinted at me through yellowed eyes. "You heard of him?" he asked. "I rode with him." The silence that followed was deep, like the world leaned in to hear the next word. They didn't laugh, didn't joke. Instead, the squinting man nodded once, slow and grave. "Then you're marked," he said. "He shows himself for a reason. He don't just give rides for fun." "What do you mean?" But they were already walking away, muttering between themselves. That night, I didn't find shelter. I kept walking. The roads felt different, the wind colder. I started noticing things. Headlights in the distance that never seemed to catch up. The hum of an engine when no car was near. At one point, I turned a corner on a rural road and found tire tracks that hadn't been there seconds before. They gleamed under the moonlight, still wet, and vanished into the woods. And then came the whisper, not a voice, but a vibration, through the soles of my boots, through the trees, into my chest. Dead Man Curve. I didn't hear it in words, I felt it. And I knew where I was going next, because whatever Big Joe had started the night he picked me up, it wasn't over, and the Phantom 309 wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was a warning. The sign was old, its paint faded and streaked with rust, but the name was clear enough in the pale light of dusk. Dead Man Curve. It wasn't marked on any of the maps I'd checked at gas stations. The road leading to it wasn't paved in places, and the trees grew too close on either side, like they were trying to swallow it whole. But I knew, deep in the pit of my stomach, that this was where Big Joe had brought me. Not the first time in his cab, but now, again, from some other place beyond the road. It wasn't just a location. It was a crossroads of stories, of things not finished. I followed the winding road on foot, my breath fogging as the temperature dropped with each mile. The sky bruised over with thick clouds. The forest seemed to hush the deeper I went. No birds, no wind, just my footsteps and the low whisper of tires long past. And then I saw it, the clearing. It opened like a scar in the forest, a wide bend in the road where the asphalt was broken and blackened like it had never healed from something terrible. Twisted metal still sat half buried in the ditch, rusted out remains of a highway guard rail torn long ago. Flowers had been left there, long wilted. The bones of a wooden cross lay splintered at the base of a tree, half choked in moss and thyme. This was where Big Joe had died, and standing in the middle of the curve was a truck, Phantom 309, exactly as I remembered it, chrome shining under the faint moonlight, engine off, lights dark, but the air around it pulsed like the echo of a heartbeat in my ears. I walked toward it, step by cautious step, until my hand rested on the cold door. It opened before I could pull it. Big Joe sat behind the wheel, same jacket, same calm eyes, same shadowed expression that looked both tired and kind. "You came," he said. I couldn't speak. My mouth had gone dry. "I didn't just pick you up that night to save you from the rain," he said. "I brought you here because there's something you need to know, something you need to see." He nodded to the passenger seat. The door opened with a sigh. Against every part of my instincts, I climbed in. The cab smelled exactly like it had before, worn leather and engine grease with something else now, ozone, like the air before lightning hits. The truck started without a key. The headlights flared to life, cutting through the trees. We rolled forward, the wheels barely making a sound. As we approached the bend again, Joe slowed and pointed to a place just beyond the curve. "That's where I saw the bus," he said quietly. "Kids, no lights, brake failure. I had to choose, plow through and live or take the ditch and burn. You chose the ditch," I said, my voice finally working. He nodded. "And now I keep coming back. Not by choice, son, not really. I thought it was just about helping lost folks like you, but there's more to it." He turned to look at me then, his face more shadow than flesh. "There's something still trapped here." Before I could ask what he meant, the truck came to a stop. The lights illuminated the forest, and something stepped into view. At first I thought it was a man, but it moved wrong, jerky and stiff, as if it had forgotten how to be alive. Its eyes glowed faintly like dying embers. It stared at the truck, then at me. "What is that?" I asked, chilled to the bone. "Was a driver once," Joe said. "One of the first to wreck here. Didn't save nobody, didn't care to. He's been tethered ever since. Angry, bitter. I've been holding him back all these years, guiding folks away from him." The figure stepped closer. The trees around him bent inward like they feared him. "But I'm getting weaker," Joe whispered. "And if he ever gets strong enough to ride the roads again..." The lights flickered. The cab trembled. "You can help stop him," Joe said, urgency rising in his voice. "But you gotta understand, the roads ain't just pavement. They remember, they carry echoes, and some of those echoes, they bite." Before I could respond, the figure lunged toward the truck, and in a flash of light, the world disappeared. I woke up in the ditch beside Dead Man Curve, cold mud clinging to my clothes, the road silent once more. No truck, no Joe, just that same worn dime in my pocket and tire tracks that faded into mist. But I knew it wasn't over. Something had followed me back, and the Phantom 309 hadn't made its last run yet. I didn't tell anyone what happened to Dead Man Curve. Who'd believe me? A phantom truck, a shadow of a man, and a warning delivered from the dead. I kept it locked inside and kept moving, drifting from town to town, truck stop to truck stop, haunted by distant engine hums and flickers of red tail lights that vanished when I blinked, but it didn't stay behind. The figure Joe showed me, the thing from the woods, it started showing up in reflections, in rearview mirrors, sometimes standing by the roadside, unmoving, just watching. Once, in a rest-stop bathroom, I caught its outline behind me in the mirror, even though I was alone. I turned fast. Nothing there. But the mirror was cracked, a single jagged line running through the glass, right through its reflection. I didn't know what it wanted, but I knew it was waiting. Then, last night, everything changed. I was walking along Route 58, a forgotten stretch of highway running between two ghost towns, when I saw it again. Headlights, big ones. The road was dry this time, the stars clear overhead, but I knew the shape of that rig before it stopped. Phantom 309. Big Joe was back. I didn't hesitate. I climbed in. The cab felt colder now, not dead, just strained, like it was barely holding itself together. Joe looked at me, his features thinner, blurred around the edges like fog on glass. "He's loose now," he said without a greeting. I held him off long as I could. "But the road's changing. He's out there, taking others, feeding off the wrecks." "Why me?" I asked. "You were marked the second I gave you that dime," he said. "You didn't run. You came back to the curve. That matters." We drove in silence for a while, the road passing under us like a black river. Then Joe pulled off onto a side road I'd never seen before. No signs, no lights. It led down into a long, narrow gulch. Trees on either side pressed in, and fog snaked along the ground. "He's down there," Joe said, "drawn by all the death in this stretch. You and me, we're the only ones who can seal it." "Seal it how?" "No sealing," Joe said, voice grim. "Only stopping. We take him with us." Before I could ask, the truck shuddered. Lights flared ahead, white, searing. Another truck, rusted, monstrous, breathing exhaust like smoke from a furnace. It barreled up from the shadows, no driver visible. Just that shape, that thing I'd seen in the woods, behind the wheel. Joe hit the throttle. "Hold on!" The Phantom 309 roared like it was alive again. Chrome gleamed in the moonlight. The other truck chased us, tires screeching, tearing into the road like claws. I saw the figure in the cab, its face warped, stretched into a grin that didn't belong on any living thing. Joe veered left. The thing matched us, veered right. Still there. Then Joe looked at me. "You still got that dime?" I pulled it from my pocket. It felt hot now. "Put it on the dash," he said. I did. The dashboard cracked. The windows pulsed. A sound like steel grinding against bone filled the cab. And then the truck picked up speed, faster than a rig should ever move, wheels leaving the ground for a moment, both trucks screaming toward a final bend in the road. "We hit together," Joe shouted. "Head on, no brakes. That's the only way." "Will it stop him?" "No, but it'll trap him again. And this time, I'm not letting go." I looked at Joe. He gave me one last nod. I jumped. I hit the ground hard, rolled into the gravel, the taste of dirt in my mouth. Behind me, impact. The earth shook. Two trucks collided in a fireless burst of noise and wind and metal torn from reality itself. Light flashed like lightning. The scream of something unholy cut the air. And then nothing, just silence. I crawled to my feet. The road was empty. No wreckage, no fire, not even tire marks. But the dime was still in my hand, blackened and cracked. I never saw Big Joe again. Never heard the name Phantom 309 spoken at any truck stop after that night. But I still walked the roads, not to escape it, to make sure he never returns. Because some ghosts drive to save, others drive to consume, and not all haunts wear chains. Some wear chrome,